The Oval Office was tense as President Olivia Sinclair paced back and forth, her brow furrowed in deep contemplation. Just hours ago, the world had been shaken to its core by an unprecedented event. First contact with an alien civilization. It had begun with a series of mysterious signals detected across numerous radio telescopes around the globe. Astrophysicists and xenolinguists worked frantically to decipher the strange, pulsing transmissions, but their efforts were quickly overshadowed when a massive fleet of alien vessels suddenly emerged from the depths of space. Hovering ominously over the United Nations headquarters in New York, the alien ships broadcast a chilling ultimatum to the leaders of Earth. Surrender your planet and people unconditionally, or be destroyed. President Sinclair replayed the recording of the alien transmission, its cold, mechanical voice echoing through the room. She shuddered, knowing that the fate of the human race now rested in her hands. Turning to her advisors, she said, "We cannot simply roll over and accept this. We have to find a way to defend our planet." One of her top scientific advisors, Dr. Emily Donovan, stepped forward. "Madam President, I believe we may have a way to fight back against this alien threat, but it will require assembling the best scientific minds from around the world, and time is of the essence." Sinclair nodded grimly. "Do it. Spare no expense. Call in every favor we have. We need a plan, and we need it yesterday." Within hours, a covert task force had been assembled at a highly classified research facility deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. Gathered were some of the brightest scientific thinkers from fields ranging from theoretical physics to advanced robotics. Leading the team was Dr. Donovan, a brilliant young astrophysicist whose revolutionary ideas had shaken the foundations of her discipline. As the team convened for the first time, the weight of their mission was palpable. Donovan took a deep breath and addressed the group. "Ladies and gentlemen, you all know why we're here. The fate of our entire species hangs in the balance. These alien invaders have made it clear. They will show us no mercy. Our only choice is to find a way to stop them, by any means necessary." One of the scientists, a gruff Russian engineer named Yuri Volkov, spoke up. "And just how do you propose we do that, Doctor? These aliens have technology centuries beyond our own. Our weapons are useless against them." Donovan nodded. "You're right, Yuri. Conventional means of warfare will not be enough. That's why we need to think outside the box, push the boundaries of what we thought was possible." She turned to the holographic display at the center of the room, which sprung to life, showing a 3D model of the alien fleet. "Based on our initial analysis, these ships are powered by a type of faster-than-light drive system we've never encountered before. If we can somehow disrupt or disable that technology, it may give us an edge." Another scientist, a young Korean physicist named Soo-Jin Park, raised her hand. "But doctor, the amount of energy required to impact a spacecraft moving at those speeds would be astronomical. We'd need a power source unlike anything humanity has ever produced." Donovan smiled slightly. "Precisely. Which is why we need to think even bigger. What if we could harness the very fabric of space-time itself?" The room fell silent as the scientists processed her words. Gradually, their expressions shifted from skepticism to intrigue. Yuri leaned forward, stroking his graying beard. "You're talking about manipulating the fundamental forces of the universe. That kind of technology would be revolutionary," Donovan finished, "and our only hope of defeating these aliens. But it's going to take all of our collective brilliance to even attempt something like this. Are you with me?" One by one, the scientists nodded, their faces filled with a mixture of trepidation and determination. They knew the stakes were higher than any of them could comprehend, but the alternative was unthinkable. Humanity's survival depended on their success. Donovan clasped her hands together. "Then let's get to work. Time is not on our side." For the next several days, the research facility buzzed with frenzied activity. Equations were scribbled across whiteboards. Computer simulations ran nonstop, and heated debates echoed through the corridors. Donovan pushed her team to the brink, fueled by an unwavering resolve to find a way to protect their home. As the alien fleet continued its slow, ominous advance towards Earth, the scientists grew increasingly desperate. Then, just as hope was beginning to fade, Soo-Jin Park burst into the main lab, her eyes wild. "I think we found it. The key to disrupting their faster-than-light drives." Donovan rushed over, her heart pounding. "What is it?" Park's hands trembled as she gestured to the screen behind her. It's beyond anything we've ever conceived. But if we can pull it off, we might just have a chance." Sinclair listened intently as Donovan briefed her on the team's breakthrough. The plan was audacious, bordering on the impossible. But if it worked, it could be humanity's salvation. "How long do you need?" the president asked solemnly. Donovan took a deep breath. "As little time as possible, Madam President. The alien fleet will be within striking distance in less than a week." Sinclair nodded, her expression hardening with resolve. "Then you and your team had better get to work. The future of our species is in your hands." The underground research facility hummed with a renewed sense of urgency as Dr. Donovan's team worked around the clock to turn their theoretical breakthrough into a functional weapon. Equations were refined, simulations were run, and prototypes were built and tested, all while the ominous alien fleet crept ever closer to Earth. Donovan pored over the latest data, her brow furrowed in concentration. The plan they had devised was unlike anything humanity had ever attempted, harnessing the very fabric of space-time itself to disrupt the alien ship's faster-than-light drives. But the sheer power required to pull it off was staggering, pushing the limits of what their current technology could handle. "We're still short on power output by nearly 40%, she said, frustration evident in her voice. "At this rate, we'll never be able to scale the device up to the size needed to affect the entire alien fleet." Yuri Volkov, the gruff Russian engineer, stepped forward. "Perhaps we are thinking too conventionally, Doctor. What if we looked at alternative power sources, something beyond our current understanding of physics?" Donovan considered his words, tapping her pen thoughtfully against the tablet in her hand. "You may be onto something, Yuri. We've been so focused on brute force that we're missing the forest for the trees. If we can't generate the power needed, maybe we need to find a way to tap into it from an outside source." She turned to Soo-Jin Park, who had been carefully monitoring the team's progress. "Soo-Jin, pull up the data on our theoretical space-time manipulation model. Let's see if there are any untapped avenues we've overlooked." Park's fingers danced across the holographic display, bringing up complex diagrams and equations. "Well, the current design does require an enormous amount of energy to create the necessary warp field. But if we adjust the parameters here," her eyes widened. "Wait, I think I see something. A potential way to siphon energy directly from the space-time continuum itself." Donovan leaned in, her heart racing. "Explain." "It's risky, and the mathematics are mind-bendingly complex," Park said. "But in theory, we could create a self-sustaining feedback loop that would allow us to draw power from the very fabric of space-time. It would give us the energy boost we need to scale up the device to the required size." Volkov let out a low whistle. "You're talking about harnessing the quantum fluctuations of the universe. If this works, it could be the key to unlocking limitless power." Donovan nodded slowly, her mind racing. "And the key to saving humanity. Soo-Jin, start running the simulations. I want to know if this is feasible within the next 48 hours. The young physicist nodded and hurried back to her station, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Donovan turned to the rest of the team, her expression grim. "We're running out of time, people. The alien fleet will be in range to attack within the week. If we can't get this device operational by then, Earth may not survive." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "So let's put all hands on deck. I want every possible resource devoted to making this work." "Understood." A chorus of determined affirmations filled the lab as the scientists redoubled their efforts. Donovan watched them, a small spark of hope igniting in her chest. If anyone could pull off this seemingly impossible feat, it was this team. Over the next 2 days, the facility was a hive of frenetic activity. Simulations were run, models were refined, and prototypes were tested, all with a growing sense of urgency as the alien fleet continued its ominous advance. Finally, as the 48-hour deadline approached, Soo-Jin Park emerged from her station, her eyes shining with excitement. "Dr. Donovan, I think we've got it. The simulations show that the space-time feedback loop is not only feasible, but it can generate the necessary power output to scale the device to the required size." Donovan felt a surge of relief mixed with trepidation. "That's incredible news, Soo-Jin. But you said it's risky. What are the potential downsides?" Park's enthusiasm dimmed slightly. "Well, the energy draw on the local space-time continuum could have unpredictable effects. We're talking about manipulating the fundamental forces of the universe here. There's no way to know the full scope of the consequences." Volkov let out a gruff laugh. "Consequences, schmequences. If this works, we won't have to worry about any consequences because we'll all be alive to deal with them." Donovan shot him a stern look, then turned back to Park. "What's the time frame on getting this device built and operational?" "If we push everyone to the limit, we can have a prototype ready in 72 hours, Park replied. "But actually deploying it and scaling it up to the required size, that's going to take at least another 48 hours on top of that." Donovan nodded grimly. "Then we don't have a moment to lose. Park, Volkov, get your teams started immediately. I'll brief the president on our progress." As she strode out of the lab, Donovan couldn't shake the feeling of unease in the pit of her stomach. The fate of the human race rested on the success of this desperate gambit. Failure was not an option. The next 72 hours were a blur of frenetic activity as Dr. Donovan's team worked around the clock to build the prototype of their experimental space-time manipulation device. Tensions were high, nerves were frayed, and tempers flared as they pushed the limits of their knowledge and abilities. Soo-Jin Park and her team of physicists toiled endlessly, refining the complex mathematical models that would form the core of the device. Yuri Volkov and his engineering crew worked tirelessly to construct the intricate hardware, integrating cutting-edge technologies with materials never before used in such an application. Through it all, Donovan served as the steady hand guiding the effort, coordinating the various teams, troubleshooting problems, and ensuring that the project stayed on track. She knew that every second counted, with the alien fleet drawing ever closer to Earth. Finally, as the 72-hour deadline approached, the prototype was ready for testing. Donovan gathered the key members of her team in the main lab, her expression grim but resolute. "All right, people, this is it. We've poured our blood, sweat, and tears into getting this device built, and now we're about to find out if it actually works." She turned to Soo-Jin Park. "Soo-Jin, take us through the final adjustments and calibrations." Park nodded, stepping up to the holographic display. The core of the device is a specialized reactor that taps directly into the quantum fluctuations of the space-time continuum. This allows us to generate an immense amount of power, far beyond anything we can produce with conventional means. She gestured to a series of complex diagrams. "The challenge has been finding a way to focus and channel that power into a directed energy beam capable of disrupting the alien ships faster than light drives. We've run countless simulations, and the models indicate that if we can get the calibration just right, we should be able to create a localized warp field that will throw their systems into chaos." Volkov crossed his burly arms, his brow furrowed in concentration. "And what are the risks of this localized warp field? You said the effects could be unpredictable." Park hesitated for a moment. "Well, the truth is, we're venturing into completely uncharted territory here. Manipulating the fundamental forces of the universe on this scale is unprecedented. There's no way to know for certain what kind of side effects or unintended consequences we might trigger." Donovan raised a hand to silence the murmurs of concern that rippled through the group. "I understand the risks, Soo-Jin. But at this point, we don't have the luxury of playing it safe. If we can't find a way to disable those alien ships, Earth won't stand a chance." She looked around the room, her gaze resolute. Are we ready to give this a try? One by one, the scientists and engineers nodded, their expressions a mixture of trepidation and determination. Donovan took a deep breath and turned to the control station. All right, let's power this thing up and see what it can do. The lab was filled with the hum of charged capacitors and the software of cooling fans as the prototype device was activated. Su-Jin and her team monitored the readouts, adjusting the calibrations with practiced precision. Suddenly, a ripple of energy began to emanate from the device, distorting the very fabric of space around it. Donovan felt a chill run down her spine as she watched the effects, simultaneously mesmerized and terrified. Power levels are holding steady, Park reported, her voice tense. Warp field is stabilizing. Now, a brilliant bolt of energy lanced out from the device, streaking across the lab and slamming into a reinforced metal bulkhead. The impact sent tremors through the ground, and for a moment, Donovan wondered if the entire facility might collapse around them. But when the dust settled, the bulkhead remained standing, albeit with a gaping hole scorched through its center. The beam penetrated nearly a meter of reinforced titanium alloy, Volkov said, his eyes wide with a mix of awe and disbelief. If we can scale this up to the size we need, it might actually work. Donovan allowed herself a brief moment of triumph, but it was quickly overshadowed by a growing sense of unease. Su-Jin, what about the side effects? Have we triggered any anomalies? Park's brow furrowed as she pored over the sensor readings. I'm not sure. The data is a bit scrambled. We may need to run some additional tests too. Suddenly, the lights in the lab flickered, and the hum of the equipment faltered. Donovan felt a wave of dread wash over her as the backup generators kicked in, casting an eerie red glow over the scene. What's happening? She demanded. I don't know, Park stammered, her fingers flying across the console. The power grid is destabilizing, and I'm detecting anomalous readings throughout the facility. Something is interfering with our systems. Volkov's face paled. You don't think? The warp field. Donovan didn't need to answer. As the implications of their experiment sank in, she knew that they had opened a Pandora's box, one that could have catastrophic consequences not just for their mission, but for the entire planet. Chaos erupted in the underground research facility as the power grid began to destabilize, triggering a cascade of system failures throughout the complex. Dr. Donovan and her team scrambled to regain control, but it was quickly becoming clear that the experimental space-time manipulation device had unleashed some kind of unforeseen and devastating effect. Donovan gripped the edge of the command console, her knuckles turning white. Su-Jin, what the hell is happening? Can you isolate the source of the problem? The young physicist's fingers flew across her keyboard, her expression one of pure panic. I'm trying, but the sensor readings are all over the place. It's like the very fabric of reality is being warped and distorted around us. A sudden rumble shook the room, and the lights flickered ominously. Volkov braced himself against a nearby wall, his face etched with concern. This is bad. If we can't get the power and systems back online, we're going to be trapped down here. Donovan's mind raced as she considered their options. The fate of the entire planet hung in the balance, and she knew they had little time to waste. Su-Jin, can you at least give me a rough estimate of how long it will take to get the device stabilized and operational again? She asked, her voice tense. Park's eyes widened as she stared at the readouts. That's the thing, Dr. Donovan. I don't think we can. The warp field we created seems to have had catastrophic effects on the local space-time continuum. I'm detecting fluctuations and distortions that are beyond anything we've ever seen or simulated. Donovan felt her stomach drop. What are you saying? Are you telling me that we can't use the device to stop the alien fleet? I'm saying that I don't know if we can use it at all, at least not without risking. Park's voice trailed off, the implication hanging heavy in the air. Volkov let out a string of curses in Russian, slamming his fist against the wall. We're doomed. All of us, and the whole damn planet. Donovan's mind raced as she tried to process the devastating news. She had been so certain that their revolutionary device would be the key to saving humanity, but now it seemed that they had unleashed an even greater catastrophe. Suddenly, an urgent message flashed across one of the monitors, drawing her attention. It was from President Sinclair, demanding a status update. Donovan swallowed hard, knowing that she would have to be the one to deliver the devastating news. With a deep breath, she activated the video link, and Sinclair's stern face appeared on the screen. "Dr. Donovan, what's the situation? My advisors are telling me that the alien fleet is less than 48 hours from Earth. Have you made any progress with the device?" Donovan hesitated for a moment, struggling to find the right words. "Madam President, I'm afraid the situation is far more dire than we anticipated. The space-time manipulation device, it's been destabilized, and we're unable to get it back online. In fact, I'm not even sure we can safely use it at all without risking." She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Sinclair's expression darkened, and Donovan could see the fear in her eyes. "Are you telling me that we have no way to stop the alien fleet from reaching Earth?" Donovan nodded, her heart sinking. "I'm so sorry, Madam President. We've failed." Sinclair was silent for a long moment, her gaze distant. Then, with a resolute nod, she spoke again. "Dr. Donovan, I need you and your team to do everything in your power to stabilize that device, or at least find some way to mitigate the damage it's caused. The fate of our species depends on it." Donovan opened her mouth to protest, to tell the president that it was hopeless, but Sinclair cut her off. "I don't care what it takes, Doctor. You've got less than 48 hours before the alien fleet arrives. If you can't find a way to stop them, then—" Sinclair's voice trailed off, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Donovan swallowed hard, her mind racing. "Madam President, I'll do my best, but I can't promise anything. The risks are—" She shook her head, unable to finish the thought. Sinclair's expression softened for a moment, and Donovan saw the fear and sorrow in her eyes. "I know, Emily. I know. But this is our last hope. For all our sakes, please, don't give up." The transmission ended, leaving Donovan and her team staring at the dark screen. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the occasional rumble and the hum of the backup generators. Volkov let out a weary sigh. "Well, looks like we're out of options. If we can't get that device working, we might as well start digging our own graves." Donovan clenched her fists, determination burning in her eyes. "No, we're not giving up, not yet. There has to be a way to fix this, or at least mitigate the damage. We just have to find it." She turned to her team, her gaze sweeping across their haggard faces. "All right, people, listen up. We've got less than 2 days to figure this out. So let's get to work. The future of humanity is counting on us." As the scientists and engineers scrambled to their stations, Donovan took one last look at the flickering monitors, her heart heavy with the weight of their failure. But she refused to give in to despair. There had to be a way, and she was determined to find it, no matter the cost. News of Earth's desperate attempt to thwart the alien invasion spread rapidly through the galactic community, sparking intense debate and controversy. While some worlds condemned the destruction wrought by the experimental space-time manipulation device, others secretly applauded humanity's defiant act. Among the most vocal critics were the leaders of the Vanguard Alliance, a powerful coalition of advanced civilizations. They denounced the reckless use of such a volatile technology, warning that the cosmic plague originating from Earth posed a grave threat to the stability of the entire galaxy. This flagrant disregard for the sanctity of life and the natural order cannot be tolerated, declared the Vanguard's supreme overseer, Karathal. The Earthlings have demonstrated their willingness to use uncontrolled forces that could unravel the very fabric of existence. They must be stopped, before their actions bring irreparable harm to us all. However, not all were quick to condemn humanity's actions. In the shadowy corners of the galactic underworld, whispers spread of a clandestine resistance movement that secretly admired Earth's defiance against the invading alien force. "Those Earthlings, they'd got a quad on them. I'll give 'em that," rumbled Grax, a notorious Orion pirate captain. "Maybe they ain't so soft and squishy after all. If they can stick it to those arrogant Vanguard pricks, then maybe they're worth keeping an eye on." As the debate raged on, a small contingent of Vanguard ships broke off from the main fleet, their course set on a collision course with the battered remains of the alien armée. Their mission: to track down the source of the cosmic plague and eradicate it before it could spread further. Back on Earth, the news of the Vanguard's impending arrival sent shockwaves through the already reeling global population. President Sinclair convened an emergency session of the United Nations Security Council, her face grim as she addressed the gathered leaders. "Esteemed colleagues, I come before you with grave news. The alien fleet may have been decimated by our last-ditch efforts, but now we face an even greater threat. The Vanguard Alliance, a coalition of advanced civilizations, has dispatched a task force to hunt us down and destroy us." A murmur of alarm rippled through the chamber. Sinclair raised a hand, silencing the din. "I know this is a terrifying prospect, but we cannot give in to fear. We must stand united and find a way to weather this storm. Our very survival as a species is at stake." One by one, the world leaders rose to voice their concerns and offer their support. Despite the deep divisions that had plagued humanity for centuries, the looming alien threat had forged an unexpected solidarity among the nations of Earth. "Madam President, you can count on the full support of the European Union," declared the Prime Minister of France. "We will contribute both military and scientific resources to aid in your defense." The Chinese foreign minister nodded solemnly. "China stands ready to lend its considerable technological and industrial capabilities to this endeavor. We will not allow our species to be extinguished without a fight." As the meeting drew to a close, Sinclair felt a glimmer of hope amidst the overwhelming sense of dread. If humanity could put aside its differences and work together, perhaps they had a chance of weathering this storm. But even as the world leaders made their solemn pledges, deep within the bowels of the secret research facility, Dr. Donovan and her team were locked in a desperate battle against time and the growing instability of the experimental device. The once pristine lab had become a chaotic warren of flickering lights, malfunctioning equipment, and erratic sensor readings. Donovan pored over the data, her brow furrowed in concentration, as Volkov and his engineering crew frantically tried to stabilize the system. "The warp field is becoming increasingly unstable," Sujin Park reported, her voice tinged with panic. "I'm detecting fluctuations in the local space-time continuum that are off the charts. If we don't find a way to contain this soon, the entire facility could be torn apart." Donovan's mind raced, searching for a solution. If they couldn't find a way to regain control of the device, not only would Earth be defenseless against the approaching Vanguard fleet, but the very planet itself could be at risk of annihilation. "There has to be something we're missing," she muttered, her gaze sweeping across the cluttered workstations. "Some way to harness the power without triggering these catastrophic side effects." Volkov let out a frustrated growl. "At this point, I'm not sure if there is a way, Doctor. We're playing with forces beyond our understanding. Maybe we should just—" He trailed off, his eyes widening as a new realization dawned on him. Donovan watched him, hope flaring in her chest. "What is it, Yuri? What are you thinking?" Volkov turned to her, his expression grim but determined. "Maybe the answer isn't to contain the power, but to embrace it, to use it against our enemies, no matter the cost." Donovan felt a chill run down her spine as she considered the implications of his words. She knew that what he was suggesting was the most desperate of gambles, one that could seal the fate of not just Earth, but the entire galaxy. But with the Vanguard fleet closing in and the fate of humanity hanging in the balance, she realized they had no other choice. "Do it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Whatever it takes, Yuri. We have to stop them." As the news of Earth's desperate actions and the impending arrival of the Vanguard fleet spread across the globe, the battered and isolated planet found itself facing a crisis on multiple fronts. Resources dwindled, economies crumbled, and civil unrest brewed as the human population struggled to cope with the dire consequences of their leaders' fateful decisions. In the streets of major cities, protests and riots erupted, with citizens venting their anger and fear at their government's perceived failures. Accusations of recklessness and deception flew as the public grappled with the realization that their world had been irrevocably changed. "They lied to us," shouted a protester in the streets of New York, her face contorted with rage. All this time, they were playing with forces they couldn't control, and now were all paying the price. Across the Atlantic, in the halls of the European Parliament, the mood was equally somber and tense. Delegates from the member states argued bitterly, each nation vying to secure its own interests in the face of the looming crisis. "We cannot just sit idly by while the Vanguard task force descends upon us," insisted the German Chancellor. "We must take action, rally our resources, and mount a unified defense." But others were more skeptical, their voices tinged with fear and resignation. "And what good will that do?" lamented the Italian Prime Minister. "The Earthlings have already demonstrated their inability to withstand the alien onslaught. How can we possibly hope to fare any better?" As the debates raged on, a younger generation of leaders and activists began to emerge, their voices rising above the din of despair and recrimination. They questioned the actions of their elders, demanding accountability and a new path forward. "This is not the time for finger-pointing and resignation," declared Amara Patel, a 28-year-old tech entrepreneur from India. "We must look to the future, to find innovative solutions that can protect our planet and our people. The old ways of thinking have failed us. It's time for a new approach." Patel's words struck a chord with many, particularly among the disillusioned youth who had grown up in the shadow of the alien crisis. Across the world, grassroots movements began to coalesce, their members united in a shared determination to take their fate into their own hands. But even as this new wave of activism and optimism started to gain momentum, the situation on the ground continued to deteriorate. Supplies and essential services dwindled, leading to widespread shortages and a breakdown in social order. Desperate citizens turned to black markets and criminal organizations, further exacerbating the chaos. In the bunkers and safe houses of the world's elite, the anxiety was palpable. Wealthy individuals and corporations scrambled to secure their own survival, hoarding resources and cutting deals with shadowy figures in the global underworld. "We can't just sit back and wait for the end," whispered one terrified CEO to his fellow board members. "We have to find a way to escape this nightmare, even if it means making unsavory alliances." Back at the secret research facility, Dr. Donovan and her team continued their frantic efforts to stabilize the experimental space-time manipulation device. But with each passing hour, their options grew increasingly bleak. "The warp field is continuing to destabilize at an exponential rate," Soo-Jin Park reported, her voice tinged with desperation. "If we don't find a way to contain the energy surge soon, the entire facility could be ripped apart, along with a significant portion of the surrounding region." Donovan's mind raced, grasping for any glimmer of hope amidst the growing chaos. She knew that the fate of the human race hung in the balance, and the weight of that responsibility was crushing. Turning to Yuri Volkov, she asked the question that had been haunting her for days. "Are you absolutely certain this is our only option? The risks are unthinkable." Volkov's expression was grim, but resolute. "I wish I could tell you otherwise, Doctor. But if we don't act now, the Vanguard fleet will arrive, and we'll all be dead anyway. This is our last chance to save Earth, even if the cost is." He trailed off, the unspoken words hanging heavy in the air. Donovan nodded slowly, her heart heavy with the knowledge of what they were about to do. "Then let's get to work. We're running out of time." As the team scrambled to implement Volkov's desperate plan, the world continued to spiral into chaos. Governments teetered on the brink of collapse, and the fragile threads of global cooperation began to unravel. In the midst of the turmoil, a new voice emerged, one that would come to embody the defiant spirit of a generation determined to forge its own destiny. "We won't just sit back and watch as our world burns," declared Amara Patel, her words echoing through the streets and airwaves. "We are the future, and we will not be defined by the mistakes of the past. Together, we will find a way to survive and to rebuild a new world, forged in the crucible of this crisis." As her rallying cry spread, a sense of cautious optimism began to take root among the beleaguered population. Perhaps, in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds, humanity could still find a way to prevail. But the clock was ticking, and the fate of the species hung in the balance. The sacrifices that lay ahead would test the limits of humanity's resilience and resolve. The arrival of the Vanguard fleet cast a pall of unease over the already battered and isolated planet Earth. The advanced alien ships, bristling with formidable weaponry, took up position just beyond the orbit of the Moon, their ominous presence a constant reminder of the looming threat. In the halls of power, world leaders scrambled to coordinate a unified defense, but the cracks in global cooperation were already beginning to show. Distrust and self-interest simmered beneath the surface as each nation jockeyed for position and struggled to secure the limited resources at their disposal. "We cannot simply roll over and accept our fate," insisted the French president, his voice tinged with desperation. "We must stand together, pool our military assets, and mount a counterattack against these invaders." But the Russian foreign minister shook his head, his expression grim. "And what good will that do? The Earthlings have already demonstrated their inability to withstand the alien onslaught. Our forces will be no match for the Vanguard's advanced technology." As the debates raged on, a growing sense of resignation began to take hold among the populace. Across the globe, citizens hunkered down, bracing themselves for the inevitable. Some even began to make preparations for the unthinkable, stockpiling supplies and seeking out safe havens far from the centers of power. "What's the point?" lamented a young woman in London, her eyes red from crying. "We're all just sitting ducks, waiting for the end. I'd rather spend my last days with my family than waste them arguing with politicians." But not everyone was willing to accept defeat so easily. In the shadows, a growing resistance movement began to take shape, its members united by a shared determination to fight back against the alien invaders and the Vanguard's perceived tyranny. "They think they can just waltz in and take over our planet," growled Grax, the notorious Orion pirate, as he addressed a gathering of his fellow outlaws and misfits. "Well, they've got another thing coming. We're going to show those arrogant Vanguard pricks that you don't mess with Earth." Across the galaxy, the Vanguard's leaders watched the unfolding events with a mixture of unease and determination. They had come to eradicate the cosmic plague that threatened the delicate balance of power, but the resilience and defiance of the human race had caught them off guard. "These Earthlings are proving to be more troublesome than we anticipated," mused Kara Thol, the Supreme Overseer, as she reviewed the latest intelligence reports. "Perhaps we should reconsider our approach. A more diplomatic solution may be warranted." But her advisors were quick to voice their dissent. "Diplomacy? After what they've done?" scoffed one of the Vanguard's military commanders. "These primitives have proven themselves to be a threat to the entire galactic order. They must be eliminated before their reckless actions bring about the collapse of our civilization." Hirathol raised a hand, silencing the dissent. "We cannot afford to underestimate them again. The human race has shown an uncanny ability to adapt and overcome, even in the face of insurmountable odds. If we are to succeed in our mission, we must tread carefully." Back on Earth, Dr. Donovan and her team continued their desperate efforts to stabilize the experimental space-time manipulation device, even as the Vanguard fleet drew ever closer. The fate of humanity hung in the balance, and the stakes had never been higher. "We're running out of time," Sujin Park reported, her voice tinged with anxiety. The warp field is becoming increasingly unstable, and the energy fluctuations are off the charts. If we don't find a way to contain this soon, the entire facility could be torn apart." Donovan nodded grimly, her mind racing to find a solution. She knew that their last-ditch gambit was a desperate and dangerous one, but with the Vanguard fleet looming and no other viable options, they had no choice but to see it through. Turning to Yuri Volkov, she said, "Yuri, are you sure this is the only way?" "The risks." The gruff engineer's expression was resolute. "There is no other choice, Doctor. We either take this chance, or we submit to the Vanguard, and watch as they destroy everything we hold dear." Donovan took a deep breath, steeling herself for the task ahead. "Then let's get to work. We've got a planet to save." As the team sprang into action, a new sense of determination and purpose filled the air. They knew that the path ahead would be fraught with peril, but they were united in their conviction that Earth would not, be sacrificed without a fight. Outside the facility, the world continued to teeter on the brink of collapse, but a glimmer of hope had been kindled. From the streets of major cities to the remote corners of the planet, a growing number of people began to rally around the idea that humanity's fate was not yet sealed. "We won't go down without a fight," declared Amara Patel, her words inspiring a new generation of activists and revolutionaries. "The Vanguard may think they've won, but they don't know the true strength of the human spirit. We will find a way to survive and to thrive, no matter the cost." As her message spread, a renewed sense of purpose and determination began to take hold. The future of the human race was at stake, and they were determined to write their own destiny, no matter the risks. The underground research facility hummed with a frenetic energy as Dr. Donovan and her team worked tirelessly to prepare for the final desperate gambit that would determine the fate of the human race. Tensions were high, but a renewed sense of purpose and determination filled the air. They knew that failure was not an option. Soo-Jin Park's fingers danced across the holographic displays, her brow furrowed in concentration. "The energy levels in the warp field are reaching critical mass. If we don't initiate the sequence soon, the entire system could overload and tear itself apart." Donovan nodded grimly, her gaze sweeping across the faces of her exhausted but resolute colleagues. "Then we don't have a moment to lose. Yuri, are the preparations complete?" The gruff Russian engineer stepped forward, his expression grim but unwavering. "As ready as they'll ever be, Doctor. We've diverted every available ounce of power to the device, and the containment systems are primed and ready to go." Donovan took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. "All right, then let's do this. Park, initiate the sequence on my mark." Soo-Jin nodded, her fingers poised over the control console. "Sequence ready. Waiting for your command." Donovan paused for a moment, her gaze sweeping across the faces of her team one last time. "You all know the risks. If this doesn't work, the consequences could be unimaginable. But if we don't try, then we've already lost." A murmur of determination rippled through the group, and Donovan felt a surge of pride. "Then let's show those Vanguard bastards what humanity is made of. On my mark, Soo-Jin. 3, 2, 1, mark." Park's fingers flew across the controls, and the air in the lab crackled with energy as the experimental device roared to life. A brilliant beam of light erupted from the reactor core, lancing out towards the distant alien fleet that hovered ominously over the planet. For a moment, time seemed to slow to a crawl as the energy beam streaked through the void, its power building with each passing second. The Vanguard ships, caught off guard by the sudden onslaught, scrambled to erect their defenses, but it was too late. The beam struck the heart of the fleet, and the very fabric of space-time seemed to buckle and distort around it. The Vanguard vessels were ripped apart, their hulls disintegrating as the warp field tore them asunder. Shards of metal and debris scattered in all directions, the deafening roar of the destruction echoing across the cosmos. Donovan and her team watched in stunned silence as the alien armada was decimated, their jaws slack with a mixture of awe and terror. They had succeeded in their mission, but at what cost? As the shockwaves of the cataclysmic event rippled outward, the underground facility began to tremble and shake. Alarms blared, and emergency lights flashed as the containment systems struggled to keep the warp field from spiraling out of control. "The field is becoming unstable," Su Jin shouted, her voice barely audible over the cacophony. "We're losing control. We have to shut it down now." Donovan's heart pounded as she watched the readouts, her mind racing. They had come so far, sacrificed so much, only to be on the brink of total annihilation. "Yuri, can we contain the overload?" she yelled, turning to the grizzled engineer. Volkov's brow furrowed, his expression grim. I don't know, Doctor. The energy levels are off the charts. If we try to shut it down, it could trigger a catastrophic chain reaction that could destroy the entire planet." Donovan felt a chill run down her spine as the implications of his words stank in. They had found a way to stop the Vanguard fleet, but in doing so, they had unleashed a force that threatened to tear the very fabric of the Earth apart. "Then what do we do?" she cried, desperation creeping into her voice. Volkov's gaze hardened with resolve. "We ride it out. We have to keep the system stable and try to channel the energy in a way that will minimize the damage." Donovan stared at him, her eyes wide. "You're insane. That's suicide." "Perhaps," Volkov said, his voice calm and steady. "But it's our only chance. If we can't contain the overload, the entire planet is doomed anyway." Donovan hesitated for a moment, her mind racing. She knew that what Volkov was proposing was the longest of long shots, a gamble that could cost them everything. But with the Vanguard fleet destroyed and the fate of humanity hanging in the balance, she realized they had no other choice. "Do it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Whatever it takes, Yuri. We have to try." Volkov nodded, turning to the rest of the team. "You heard the lady. Let's get to work. We've got a planet to save." As the team sprang into action, Donovan felt a surge of hope mingled with a deep sense of dread. They had come so far, and now they were staring into the abyss, their future uncertain. But she knew that they had to fight, no matter the cost. The fate of the human race rested on their shoulders, and they were determined to write their own destiny, no matter what the universe had in store.